For years I've mounted cameras and my iPhones in the overhead hanging from the garage storage bin and looking down on my desk/workshop. But I thought I needed a better way to advance the camera up and down, so I came up with two tripod jigs. The first one we'll call a failure, and I'll move that, how I created that, over to the end of this video. The other one is using a Woby Jig, which you can get the plans for on the internet. I'll leave links below on how to get to the Woby Jig. And so we'll start out the video by showing you the Woby Jig. This quest started when I purchased a 6-way focusing rail. I really wasn't happy with the way it worked, so I started looking on the internet for a good tripod jig. I didn't like the results of the two tripod jigs I used for overhead mounting the camera, so I switched to a Woby Camera Jig. I downloaded the plans from the Woby Design website. This is a list of the parts you need to create the project, and then it comes with 4 templates or 5 depending on whether you do version 1 or version 2. And here's a picture of the raw material I obtained from Woodworker's Source in Tempe, and I got the nuts and bolts from Lowe's. Putting a little spray adhesive on the plans, and then attaching the plans to the 12 by 12 by 1/2 inch Baltic birch plywood. Here's the result of all the parts cut out on the bandsaw. Now I'm using double-sided tape to stick the two halves together so that when I drill the holes, they're perfectly aligned. With the pieces sandwiched together, I'm sanding all of the outside edges so that they line up nicely. Now I'm drilling a few holes. I did this in time-lapse. I should have did it in regular video and just slowed it up. It would have been easier to watch. Now I have to separate all of these pieces that I've stuck together with double-sided Scotch tape. And then after I separate them, I'm going to label each one so that the ends match. I don't want to switch the top end for the bottom end, then the sides wouldn't necessarily perfectly match. So I have a little machinist stamp lettering set that I'm going to use to put an A on the first pair and a B on the second pair and so on at one specific end so that I can line them up in the end, and hopefully things will match. Okay, they look like they're ready for some stain or paint. I decided to put lacquer on. I would have used polyurethane, but I found I was out of polyurethane and I had a couple cans of lacquer. Also, it's supposed to dry quicker. It sure stunk up the garage, but within 24 hours it didn't smell. Polyurethane would have probably smelled for days. I tried to make sure I sprayed all of the edges on this first pass. Now I'm going to flip it over and try to do the back side of them. This is the next day. Here's where my can of lacquer ran out and I switched to the second can. On the main body, I hammered in the T-nut from the back side and I hammered in the 6 bolts from the other side, the hex bolts into the little round holes to firm them up. Here's the knob that's going to tighten the unit to the steel pipe. After you pound these guys in, aligned with the grain as best you can. Then they'll be solid as a rock. And then I pound it in this T-nut, and then you just assemble it. First adding one washer over each bolt. Then two spacers, and these are matched pairs. And two legs, and again these are matched pairs. Then double the washers on each one. Our two washers. And that's to leave space for the pipe that will go in the middle. Then again the matched spacers. And the matched legs. One more set of washers here. Notice these are large holes so that they can be maneuvered in place. Finally, the base plate. Which takes just a little persuasion. One more washer. Then you take your iron pipe, stick it in the hole, push these two side pieces in tight, and then tighten this down. I used these nylon lock nuts. You want to tighten these until the washer doesn't move. Now things are fairly snug. Let's loosen these up just a tad. Make sure these movable spacers are pushed tight against the bar. Now, that's a little too tight. That feels pretty good. you'll know if you have not enough washers or too many washers. If you tighten these up and then you can't move the bar, that means you need more washers in the center section. But if you use 1/2 inch birch plywood, this should work out fine with 2 spacers in the middle, 2 washers in the middle section, and then 1 washer in every other section after that. Then you just go to the next piece, which is here. And this needs 4 bolts pounded into it. And I'll go do that on the vise and come right back. Like that, we have them plugged in. So I pounded these 4 bolts in. Now we could insert them into this mess. Again, we need lots of washers. There's another pack of washers. And then again, between these, we'll put double washers. Another egg. Okay. Another egg. And finally, the base pipe again, just like before. And I'm just tightening here until the washer doesn't move. Then we can take this out temporarily to make room. So again, we just have to connect this angle part with these arms with washers. Again, 2 washers to keep spacing similar between each of these legs. Washers. And this one. Get this matching pieces on here. Almost 3 washers. I believe this is probably the last hole I will have to drill. I got this ball head from Amazon for just over $8, but don't get excited or write the number down because I didn't like it and I'm sending it back. The reason is the Manfrotto Quick Connect wasn't truly compatible with Manfrotto. With a true mount, it was too loose. Nevertheless, here it is mounted on the Woby Jig, and here's the sort of complete assembly. Now I had this thing over my bench that I needed to mount the pipe floor mount flange so that I could hook the pipe to it, so that I could hook the Woby Jig to it, Here it is completed and compressed to take the least amount of room. So here it is holding my Olympus EM5 Mark II, and here it is holding my iPhone. Here's my replacement ball head I got from Amazon. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Here's a picture of the Woby Jig showing the original mount and then the version 2 mount. I didn't realize the difference until I figured out that I couldn't get as low as I wanted, so I switched it from the original mount to the newer version 2 mount. So there's the new ball head. Here's the unit fully extended on the workbench. Now I can get as low as I want for macro photography. Lastly, here it is completed and folded up on top of my workbench. That's the end of part 1. I'll call the Woby Jig a success. Now stay tuned only if you want to see the other jig I made first, which I will consider a failure. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and I'd appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up on this thing and subscribe. I got this new 6-way focusing rail. Actually, it's just 2 separate 2-way focusing rails stacked on top, plus a Z-axis device. But I really wanted to mount it to take photos looking straight down over my workbench. I had been previously taking photos and videos using this old slick tripod that was mounted in my garage overhead storage bin that I erected just to the back side of my desk. I also had this old Bosch & Lomb heavy-duty sturdy tripod that I got at Goodwill for $5 or $6. It wasn't perfect, but I used it a few times. I thought perhaps if I combined this tripod with my old slick tripod, I could rig up something with my overhead bin such that I could manipulate X, Y, and Z to take photos over my desk. So I took the old Bosch & Lomb tripod apart. Here you can see my mess on my desk doing so. It was kind of a shame because it had a really nice fluid head that was mounted on it. I had to modify it a little bit to hold a Manfrotto mount, but it worked. Here's the results of disassembling the Bosch & Lomb tripod. I took one leg completely off, and I just took the other 2 legs apart in pieces to see what I could use in the overhead bin. So here's the Bosch & Lomb mounted on the rack to become the Y-axis of my tripod mount, and it's only held on with a few little tie wraps for now. I wanted to make sure I could extend it far enough out to reach over the desk as well as retract it so it could get towards the front edge of the desk. Here's the old fluid head before and after I took the Manfrotto RC2 mount off of it. Such a shame, but I have no use for a fluid head, and the base of the tripod and the legs are going to be I hope a valuable resource for my XYZ mount. Here's my trusty old slick tripod after I took it apart to its constituent pieces. Here I am trying to mount an aluminum plate to the front of the Bosch & Lomb tripod. I didn't think it was sturdy enough with just the single 1/4-20 screws, so I added 2 little screws on the side to help hold it. The nut on the 1/4-20 thread for the base was getting in the way of this shaft, so I drilled a big hole just to relieve it so I could mount it flush against the aluminum plate that I had created. Now that I can set the shaft flush against the aluminum plate, I drilled 6 holes in the aluminum plate so that I could, at least temporarily, mount the shaft against the aluminum plate with some tie wraps. Well, there it is, pretty much completed. I don't think I'll firm up the tie wraps. I'm going to use it as is for a while. I'm not all that happy with it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.